Let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members will please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right. This morning, on this March 13th, which I think is the red full moon night tonight. Is that tonight, I think? Interesting. Yeah, that's why today, and that's why everyone's feeling all the ways. We are very pleased to have Reverend Meredith West of St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Easton, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 37th District. Please rise for the invocation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Senator Motz. Let's pray. O God of expansive grace, we, your people, claim that there are many paths to know you and to follow you. As we labor here on earth to care for our neighbors, we pray that you embolden us with your will and knowledge. Fill this space with your spirit of service, wisdom, and courage. And in all things, may your will, not ours, be done. I humbly pray that each of these public servants feels the presence of the one they call upon to guide their steps, their words, and their actions for the sake of all your people. Amen. Thank you.
Recognizing the senator from the 37th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I just want to thank Reverend West and her husband, Mr. West, for making time to join us driving across the bridge this morning. She's taking over the reins at St. Mark's Church in Easton, Maryland, where I attended kindergarten. So they're partly responsible for the Johnny Mouse who's here today. So
I don't know what to say about that.
It's a great honor, and if we could journalize the remarks, and thank you again, Reverend West.
Of
Mr.
course,
West,
without
please.
objection, we will journalize the wonderful invocation this morning, and thank the Reverend for her wonderful opening this morning. Thank you. Thanks so much. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? Mr. Minority Whip, Senator from Carroll County. All right, clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We have some very special guests this morning for our first resolution. If we could hear from the senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I suspect you know these faces. I suspect you know these names. But just in case history is too fleeting and 4 years ago was too long ago for people's memories, it is such an extreme honor to have with us in the Senate this morning Officer Daniel Hodges, Sergeant Equilino Gonell, Officer Michael Fanone, Officer Harry Dunn. I'm a word nerd, you guys know that about me, and yet words fail me when I'm thinking about these heroes, these patriots who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th of 2021 and who defended democracy. They were assaulted, tased, beaten, battered, and wounded physically and emotionally. 3 of them can no longer work due to their injuries. Only Officer Hodges is still an active police officer. America has been divided, was divided during the election. But after the election, our country has historically come together. That didn't happen after the 2020 election. And on January 6th of 2021, thousands of Americans participated in an insurrection that could have resulted in even more deaths and more injuries. But it's because of heroes like these 4 and others some of whom survived and some of whom did not. That our Capitol was mostly unscathed, and our members of Congress and US senators mostly survived the experience, although some of them really are still traumatized, and their staffs. So there are places in this country where these heroes are criticized, are threatened, their families are threatened, they're taunted. But here in Annapolis, in the Senate, I knew that we would want to recognize and celebrate and welcome them and thank them for their service. So with that, Mr. President, I have 4 bios. I'm not going to bother reading them. All 4 of them have served honorably, have many served in the military, served as police officers, and again have shown their courage and fortitude before, during, and ever since. And the reason you would know their faces, because too many times police officers are anonymous, these were the 4 officers who testified before the January 6th Congressional Committee and shared their stories of the brutality. 3 of them have written books, and they are struggling. It's hard for them to find jobs because they are so identified and so toxic to some Americans, which is tragic. So I would like, Madam Secretary, I would like to honor these 4 heroes with the resolution, if you could read it in full, please.
Clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the U.S. Capitol Police officers in recognition of your heroism, courage, and dedication in protecting our U.S. Capitol, safeguarding our freedom, and defending our democracy on January 6, 2021. The entire membership directs its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 13th day of March, 2025.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Congratulations from the Senate of Maryland. Thank you so much for your incredible service. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all so much for your service. We are deeply, deeply, deeply appreciative. Thank you. All right. Senator from the 28th District.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Good morning to you. This is Women's History Month, and every year I bring up someone from my district who represent the service that women perform in our communities, often unsung, the winds behind our sails, and this year, no different. In front of us, we have Mrs. Lanissa James with us. I'll give her current title. She serves as Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Christian Homeschoolers. In Maryland, the state of Maryland, there are over 45,000 homeschoolers. 45,000. And I'm proud to say my family was one of those families. And we enjoy the support of Mrs. James. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible talks about, in the Old Testament, the Lord is my shepherd. When I was injured on active duty, that phrase, that Bible verse came to my mind when I woke up. Doctors thought I wouldn't make it. The Lord is my shepherd. And that was when I was 24 years old. And when we were going through my kids trying to get a quality education, we were hitting a roadblock in the school system, we reached out to the Homeschooling Association, and Mrs. James became our shepherd. God is our major shepherd, and we have minor shepherds. You're major too, man, but help to shepherd us through the rocky paths that we have to go through. So with deep passion for fostering high-quality learning experiences, Mrs. James has been instrumental in advancing policies and initiatives that support educators, family, and learners. Under Mrs. James' leadership, the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators has expanded professional development opportunities, strengthened advocacy efforts for equitable access to education, and has promoted best practices that enhance childhood learning environments. Today, there are over 400 homeschoolers, children, young people here today on campus. And you'll see them all around in your offices. We have some in the stands in the gallery behind us. We want to say welcome to them. And they're here to support Mrs. James. We see a vastly diverse set of folks. We work together really well to support our children. And I really thank this community for being there for my family. It's personal to me. So I'm here to present this Senate resolution to Mrs. James. Her family has been quite important in my family life, even me being here in the Senate. You know, her children, some of them have worked as interns in my office here in Annapolis. I'm so thankful to Mrs. James and the entire Maryland Association of Christian Homeschool. So, Mr. President, will the clerk please read the resolution?
Clerk will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all, the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to Lannister James, Executive Director, Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, in recognition of your 35 years of advancing education, fostering community engagement, empowering families statewide. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 13th day of March, 2025.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the clerk will take the call. To Ms. LaNizer James, the Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, and those who are here, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your 35 years of advancing education and fostering community here in the state of Maryland. Thank you for your contributions. All right, recognize the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two individuals to introduce. The first is joining me here on the floor. If you would, Trey, take a stand up for a second. This is Trey Somerville. Trey Somerville, we do something interesting in our office. We actually bring in interns while they're in high school. We do a virtual program, keeping everything safe. But we get these young future leaders the opportunity to engage with us with the political process. Trey is an exceptional student. He did an impeccable job with his assignments over that 6-week program. Trey is currently a student at George Mason University, where he's studying government and international politics. His future includes a graduate degree, completing his book on political theories and philosophy, marketed to young Americans to increase youth engagement in civics and politics. Trey resides in St. Mary's, so I always give deference to my colleague from District 29, but he is a staunch example of what tomorrow looks like for us, and we're honored to have him with us in our office. We keep them around for a while, so he will be back as well. So, Trey, if you all could give him a warm Senate welcome.
Welcome.
He will be shadowing me for the today. And Mr. President, I also have a young lady in our in the gallery, a Miss Simone Carpenter.
Yes.
If she's in the gallery.
She is.
All right. Colleagues, please welcome Miss Simone Carpenter in the gallery. She attends, and I don't get in between these two fights, Mr. President, for the HBCU. She attends Hampton University, full ride to Hampton University, you know, where she considers that to be the real HU. I'll just leave it at that. She's joined by her father, Jonathan Carpenter. She is on the pre-med track with plans to become a neuroscientist. She graduated from high school with an associate degree, which a lot of our future leaders are engaged in programs such as that, which is terrific. And she has also the plans of publishing a book on, publishing a book regarding brain tumors and various genes. Her goal in life is to change the scope of neurological disease treatment across the nation, especially for Black and brown people. Mr. President, one thing that I believe in and one thing that I live by, leadership development and getting out of the way of tomorrow's leaders. So I think with two young people that have been introduced today, the state of Maryland can say that we are in good hands going forward with our future leaders. So, Ms. Simone, welcome.
Welcome. Excellent. Very briefly, Senators, I am very pleased to have some of my own constituents here today who are joining for some district leaders from the 46th District, joined by Jeff Brown, Nadine Bowen, and Beth Whitmer. They're amazing community advocates and just thankful that they're here today. Thank you all so much. Welcome. Yes, Senator for Harford County and Cecil.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad my colleague from Charles County did a wonderful job introducing the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators. And with that group this morning, I had some in my office, and one is a longtime friend of mine that's here. I'd like to have him stand and be recognized. Pastor Andrew Goins from the Elk Neck Baptist Church in Cecil County.
Welcome.
Let's give him a warm Senate welcome.
Excellent, welcome. Senator from the 14th District, Montgomery County, has a special guest today.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think the senator from District 27 mentioned future leaders. I'm very proud to have my son Sam sing Democracy in Action today. I hope you give him a warm Senate welcome.
Welcome, Sam. Great to see you again. Got to take a picture with Chromite this morning. It was pretty cool. Yes, Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while we're on the subject of future leaders, I am excited that today we have visiting students from the Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda. They're here with their public policy class to watch government in action, so please give them a warm Senate welcome.
Welcome, welcome. I know the state's comptroller is very proud to be an alum of the Walt Whitman High School. Yes, Senator from Howard and Anne Arundel counties.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to take a moment to recognize for many of our residents who are who practice Islam, and this is the holy month of Ramadan. We have about 350,000 Muslims throughout the state, many of whom are watching or are here, including some 2 billion Muslims around the world. This time is a time of reflection, devotion, and community. It's a month dedicated to spiritual growth, self-discipline, and charitable giving and compassion. Those observing the fast from dawn till sunset during this time of the year refrain from food and drink, which means it serves as a recognition of self-restraint and a reminder of the importance of empathy for those who are less fortunate. As we reflect on the values that Ramadan embodies, let us also remember the significance of unity and diversity within our great state. Our strength together lies in our ability to come together to support one another and to celebrate our differences. This month serves as a reminder of the importance of kindness and community service, and so we want to extend a warm appreciation to those who are celebrating Ramadan and Ramadan Mubarak to those who are observing. So if we could ask the body for recognition to those who are here and those who are observing as well.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for being with us.
I also have two folks I want to recognize in the forward gallery. We have Morgan Carroll, who's a social work student at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and also Dr. Greg Dudzik, who's a resident physician from Johns Hopkins, who are here observing in the forward gallery this morning. Thank you so much.
Excellent, very good. Welcome. All right, Senator from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President, Senate colleagues and friends. We have more young talent in the Senate chamber today. We have a group of students from Crisfield High School, if they'll stand, and led by their government history teacher, Mr. Randy Laird, who's been recognized by the Maryland State Education Association. And you can imagine how early the Crisfield High School students had to come and to join us here in Annapolis. Please welcome them, and we're really glad to have you with us.
Welcome, welcome. All right, Senator from District 6, I think as our final introduction of the day.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I have an intern here this year that's been working with me all year long from St. John's College. And if you ever watch the Seinfeld episode, you know, you have names like Kramer and Newman. Well, this guy is known by Jackson. And I just want to have him stand and please give a warm welcome to Jackson.
All right, Jackson, welcome. Welcome. All right, excellent. Well, we're so pleased to have everybody here. We have a busy day today, so I hope everyone got their lunch before they came in. It's going to be we got a lot of work. So we're going to jump right into it. So we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We'll see. We're going to work as long as we can, and we'll see where that takes us. All right, let's start with the Committee on Finance. This is report number 20. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 215, Chair, Finance Committee, Cannabis, On-Site Consumption Establishment, and Cannabis Events, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Every year we have a cannabis bill. This year it's Senate Bill 215. It's a departmental bill that, as amended, strikes language authorizing cannabis events and repeals the authorization for the Cannabis Administration to issue on-site licenses during the second licensing round. Although the bill delays the issuing of on-site licenses, the bill retains language altering the framework for on-site establishments, including authorizing the establishments to operate as a food service facility if all the requirements of a political subdivision for operating as a food service facility are met. Additionally, Senate Bill 215 extends the delivery of medical cannabis by 1 year until July 1st, 2026, as we wait for the new micro companies to come on board. It also authorizes cannabis business transfers for the purpose of an ESOP, that's an employee purchase of an organization, and clarifies that a political subdivision that fails to adopt an ordinance establishing distance requirements for cannabis licenses will be subject to the requirements in the state statute. Number 4, it alters supply requirements for dispensers, and 5, specifies that a cannabinoid beverage is not a food product to ensure it is taxed as cannabis. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 alters the bill as described. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2
Mr. President?
Oh, yes, recognizing the senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you. I just wanted to make first.
Question for the floor leader?
Yes, absolutely.
Senator may proceed.
Could you, again, just to make clear, these amendments, how does it affect some of the equity initiatives that we've put forth under this?
We're still waiting for a lot of these equity businesses to come online. So there's not a direct, other than we're delaying the issuing of licenses for on-site consumption because it's still too soon for that. We put in a framework, but we're not licensing them for another year.
The delay is for a year?
The actual licensing of on-site consumption is delayed for a year in the bill.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, additional questions on the committee amendments? If not, any objections to the amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Recognizing the minority whip on the amendments, or excuse me, on the amended report? No. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and, the question is on the amended report still. Okay. Any discussion on the report? Recognize the minority whip on the report? Or not? No, okay. Okay. All right, questions on the amended report. Any discussion, any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. But looks like the chair may have a subsequent amendment. If we could have the pages collect and distribute the senator's amendment. And once we get it loaded, we'll ask the... All right, the chair will describe the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment restores language in current law to avoid some unintended consequences. The amendment would have limited the 25% shelf space requirement to apply only to social equity licenses products only, but exclude some other licenses that are majority minority owned, such as we did in HB2 licenses, from being able to compete for that 25% of shelf space. The committee intends to look at this language more over the interim so it can address the concerns of both the social equity licenses, and most of which are not currently operational, and the effect on other independent minority licenses in the state to avoid excluding any licenses unintentionally.
All right, the senators move the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Yes, recognizing the senator from Baltimore County on the subsequent committee amendment.
Thank you very much. Again, I would just ask if the floor leader.
Will the floor leader yield for a question? Senator may proceed.
Could you, again, and I apologize, I'm not as familiar with this, but could you explain what this amendment does again?
In the bill that came in, there was an amendment added from the new administrator at the Maryland Cannabis Commission, and instead of allowing 25% of shelf space to go to other minority businesses, processors, and growers, it was going to limit only to social equity companies, not other minority operators. And so there are really no social equity companies up and running. This is a big change that we didn't really discuss. And so this just will leave us time in the interim to discuss this and see if we want to continue with this only to social equity companies.
It limits their shelf space, is that?
It would give the social equity companies 25% of all shelf space in Maryland. And, you know, all grow. The problem is these large MSOs that have they each have like 4 companies. It would limit their shelf space even from other minority processors and growers that are currently operating. So it was a real problem for the current minority owners. And so we're just not making that change immediately. We're going to have time to review it over the interim.
And this amendment was offered by the administration?
No, this amendment is offered by the committee.
By the committee. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, let's go to the senator from the 40.
None of the amendment.
Nope. Senator from the capital city on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the floor leader yield for a question?
Senator may proceed.
Thank you.
I'm trying to understand the differences between the social equity applicants and then the minority operators. Could you detail what those different buckets are?
There are operators now who are minority owned. For instance, you know, it's not just the social equity, but they've already been in business for a while and they're owned by minority executives. And so this would have excluded them from having any shelf space. Particular concern, Senator, is these large MSOs. We have a number of these really large companies, out-of-state companies, that own like 4 locations in Maryland, and it would limit the sale that is currently available to other minority businesses.
What's considered a minority business?
MBE, Minority Business Enterprises. It could be whether it's diversity by gender or ethnicity. I don't know the minority definition, but I know it's gender and ethnicity.
And what are the social equity businesses?
Most of those are I've gone to some of the events. Most are African American businesses that are, you know, we're trying to help them get up and running, but very, very few have managed to actually get into the marketplace yet. So that's why this is a little premature until we actually have businesses ready to operate in Maryland.
So without the amendment, the requirement would be there for 25% of the shelf space to go to the social equity businesses, which you've identified as largely African American, and with the amendment, we would take that away.
It's already, we're just putting it back to where it is right now.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
All right. Senator from District 1 on the amendment.
Thank you. May the
chair yield for a question. Senator may proceed.
Stand for a question, please.
Sure.
So, is there anywhere else in the code where we ask and we require certain inventory percentages? So, like, do we do this in grocery stores for soda to require a certain amount of space for sodas for one company over another? Do we do this for chips? Do we do this in pharmacies? Do we do this?
Pardon me? I don't believe we do. I don't know the entire code, Senator. I've only been here 27 years, so I don't know the entire code, but I have an answer.
It's not desired as a
Stand up,
gotcha. I
please.
just don't. Just a question. I've never.
We do not, the analyst says we do not do this anywhere else in the code, but cannabis is such a highly regulated business that we're doing it for cannabis.
Interesting. Thank you.
But we're just, there were brackets in the bill that took out some other businesses, and so we're just taking the brackets out and returning it back to where it was before this bill this year.
So I understand the premise of the policy that was passed by the state of Maryland to go forward with this. But being a free market person, I just don't understand why we are putting the thumb on the scales where we're not doing it anywhere else in retail.
You know, Senator, I think we do it in ways where we encourage minority businesses with grants and funding and opportunities, and maybe not by shelf space, but there's a lot of ways that we've continued to encourage our minorities to become part of our businesses in Maryland.
And I concur with that. I don't by any manner think that that's not right or wrong. I just don't understand why we are actually diving into the retail business and determining how many percentage of product is going to be reserved for one protected or one class. I just don't understand.
So, Senator, we'd already passed this bill previously. All we're doing is returning it to the current code from a previous bill. That's what this amendment does.
I understand that, but
Okay.
that still speaks to of questioning, well, if we've done it before, maybe there was a reason why we took it out, and maybe it had to do with that we don't do this for any other retail product placement. So, just a question.
Well, that's
Thank you.
probably a bill for a different day. This amendment just returns it to the prior language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Any objections to the committee amendment? Without objection, oh, I'm sorry. Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's been a lot of discussion about this Senate Bill 215. I was hoping that could we just hold this bill until the next session, because a few of us want to talk about the 25% and a couple of other things as it pertains to this bill.
All right, senators move to lay the bill over under the rule. The motion is in order. The bill and the amendments will lie over under the rule. Clerk, read the next bill.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. Madam Clerk, before we read, if we senator from the 26th district.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for letting me interrupt with this. I want to get a good Senate welcome for my niece, Shonda Stansbury Beck, stand up, and my great nieces, Samantha, Sydney, Spencer, and Silas. They're here. She's with the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators, and I am just grateful and happy to have them here spending the day with me today. I hope that if you have any bad stories, you won't tell them that today. Wait and send them a note. But would you give a warm Senate welcome to my family?
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, Madam Clerk, if we could read the next bill.
Senate Bill 689, Senator Guile, Financial Institutions, Conventional Home Mortgage Loans, Assumption and Requirement Disclosures, favorable to amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 689 requires banking institutions, credit unions, and mortgage lenders to include a provision in all conventional home mortgage loans that allows any of the existing borrowers to purchase the property interests of other borrowers in the event of a divorce. The affected financial institutions must disclose the assumption provision in writing to a loan applicant before the completion of the loan application. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 strikes language in the bill that would have made the act retroactive. There is no fiscal impact. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 689 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 771, Senator Guile, Peer-to-Peer Car Sharing Programs, Insurance and Liability, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 771 makes changes to provisions of law governing the car insurance for peer-to-peer car sharing. Current law specifying which insurance coverage is primary when a vehicle is being used for a peer-to-peer sharing program is repealed. Instead, the bill authorized part or all of the motor vehicle liability insurance covering a vehicle while it is being used for peer-to-peer sharing to be provided by the individual driving the vehicle. In addition, provisions of current law are repealed that prohibit an insurer from denying or canceling a policy because a motor vehicle covered by the policy has been made available through a peer-to-peer program. There are also changes regarding out-of-state accidents, who gets charged for tolls, and that a peer-to-peer car sharing program is not liable for a traffic citation issued through a remote camera. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 771 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 842, Senator Bidel, Other Tobacco Products and Electronic Smoking Devices, Seizure and Wholesaler Licensure Requirements, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill actually returns the authority to the ATC that previously existed when enforcement was under the comptroller. So Senate Bill 842 authorizes the executive director of the ATCC to seize electronic smoking devices that are sold or offered for sale in violation of the business regulation article without a warrant. The executive director must give notice of a seizure to the person from whom the ESD is seized at the time of seizure, stating the right of the owner or other interested person to file a claim for return of the seized property. This is generally the same process that currently exists for contraband alcohol and tobacco products. The bill also requires each ESD wholesaler, distributor, or importer to make specified records, keep those records for up to 6 years, and allow the executive director of the ATCC to examine the records. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 strikes language in the bill related to other tobacco products and strikes provisions in the bill that would have established an electronic smoking devices wholesaler license and authorized a peace officer to seize certain products without a warrant. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 842 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 872, Senator Jennings, Local Government Hiring and Promotion Preferences for Veterans and Spouses of Service Members and Veterans, Family Serve Act, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognize the senator from Carroll County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 872 authorizes counties and municipalities to grant hiring and promotion preferences to eligible veterans and their spouses. The bill specifies that such a preference does not violate any state or local equal employment opportunity law. A county or municipality that elects to offer hiring or promotion preferences or credits under the bill does need to adopt a local law granting those preferences or credits. Further, counties or municipalities that use a selection test to hire or promote employees are authorized to award 10 credit points on the test to veterans or their spouses. The amendment that we have on the bill is clarifying. There was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I would move the adoption of the committee amendment and favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? All right, any objections to the report? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Recognizing the senator from District 7 has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Working with the House sponsor and the House on this, looking at some feedback from the locals. They had some concerns with parts of it, and there was provision there about requiring parts of it. They've asked if we could change it from shall to may. So that's what this amendment does, is it just changes that section from shall to suggestive of may.
All right. Senator moves the amendment from the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We consider this a very friendly amendment from our good friend from District 7, and we accept the amendment.
All right. Any objections to the amendment from the floor? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 872 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Calendar 21 out of Finance. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 219, Chair, Finance Committee, Uninsured Employers Fund, Additional Assessment on Awards and Settlements Amount, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Uninsured Employers Fund is this Senate Bill 219 is a departmental bill which has amended increases the additional assessment that the Board of the Uninsured Employers Fund may direct on the Workmen's Compensation Commission to impose a specific workmen's compensation awards and settlements from 1% to 1.5%. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 decreases from up to 2% to up to 1.5%. The additional assessment that may be collected increases the fund balance that must be achieved before part of the assessment must be suspended and makes a corresponding change to when the assessment must resume, and requires the Workmen's Comp Commission to appoint a special monitor to report on the financial condition of UEF for a period of 1 year. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 219 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 447, Senator Lamb, Hospitals, Emergency Medical Conditions, Procedures, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 447 pertains to ensuring that women have life-saving abortion care at any hospital in the state if it's necessary. The bill builds upon a federal statute that was passed several decades ago that requires emergency departments to provide treatment to patients experiencing an emergency. If a hospital can't treat that patient, they must do what they can to stabilize and then transfer that patient out to somewhere where they can receive that treatment that they need. After the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, the Biden administration issued guidance clarifying that hospitals and emergency departments can and must be required to continue to provide abortion care when it is needed and necessary for a patient to address an emergency. That decision now is in jeopardy. That statute is in jeopardy because it is being litigated up to the Supreme Court, and the current administration has decided not to pursue further defense of that federal statute. And so this bill generally codifies that federal statute in state law called EMTALA with respect to pregnancy-related medical conditions only. And this is because women oftentimes, if they have a medical emergency, have no choice or say in which emergency department or hospital they may be transferred to by an ambulance. If a hospital with an emergency department determines that a patient has an emergency pregnancy-related medical condition, the hospital must, using the staff and facilities available to the hospital, provide further examination and the treatment required to stabilize the emergency pregnancy-related medical condition, including termination of a pregnancy when termination is medically necessary to stabilize the patient, or they must transfer the patient to another medical facility. If an emergency pregnancy-related medical condition has not been stabilized, the hospital may not transfer the patient unless the transfer is done consistent with the federal EMTALA statute. The bill also establishes protections for hospital employees, establishes penalties applicable to a hospital for negligent violation of the bill's requirements, and makes conforming changes. This applies at the facility or hospital level. There continues to be a conscience clause within state statute that does not require any provider to do something that they are not comfortable with. There are 2 amendments to this bill. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 narrows the scope of the bill to only emergency pregnancy-related medical conditions. It strikes certain civil penalties applicable to a physician and an individual cause of action related to a hospital. Requires the Department of Health to stay a final decision related to the bill's requirements if there is an ongoing federal investigation. It also requires the department to offset any state fine by the amount of a federal fine, and requires the refund of a state fine if the federal fine is assessed within a certain amount of time. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 447 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 748, Senator Kramer, Public Health, Alzheimer's Disease and Related Dementias, Information on Prevalence and Treatment, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Maryland has the highest per capita rate of Alzheimer's and dementia-related diseases in the nation. That is a terrifying statistic. Senate Bill 748 expands the information that the Maryland Department of Health must incorporate into relevant public health outreach programs to include information for healthcare providers on treatments approved by the FDA for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, and to increase understanding and awareness of early treatment of Alzheimer's and related dementias. Amendment 1 makes a technical correction and expands the information shared with healthcare providers to include relevant information on treatment, use, and outcomes, and expands the information shared with the public to include approved treatments and related information, including information related to treatment outcomes based on biological sex, and expands the required elements of the website. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 748 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 792, Senator Mouts, State Board of Dental Examiners, Expanded Function, Dental Assistance, Education, and Reinstatement, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 37th as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 792 requires the State Board of Dental Examiners to reinstate an expanded functional dental assistant, that's an EFDA, certificate that is expired only if the holder, one, has completed the continuing education requirements set by the board, two, has submitted a renewal application before the deadline set by the board, and three, pays a renewal fee. The bill also expands the authorized courses of study an applicant may complete to qualify for EFDA certification. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 specifies that a course of study for initial EFDA certification must include 35 hours of instruction consisting of both online and in-person instruction, and clarifies that regulations adopted by the board must include hands-on training. There is no fiscal impact. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. I missed it, sorry. On the two committee amendments, any discussion, any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 792 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, sticking with finance. Report number 22. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 439, Senator Lamb, Higher Education, High Impact Economic Development Activities, Alterations, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the senator from Howard and Arundel as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 439 alters the definition of high impact economic development activity, or HIDAs, to exclude cost savings related to the reduction in the number of University System of Maryland employees. Additionally, the USM Board of Regents must include additional information in its annual report on HIDAs. The bill also repeals the authorization for officials or employees of public higher education institutions to serve as directors, officials, or employees of entities supporting HIDAs, and makes the entities subject to the state's procurement law. The recommendations all stem from a report done by the Department of Legislative Services, Office of Legislative Audits, and certainly appreciate the audit team for their effort in bringing this to our attention. There are two amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 requires the Board of Regents to include in its policies and procedures for establishing a HIDA that the HIDA submit to audits conducted by OLA during its audit of the institution that established the HIDA, basically clarifying that OLA has the authority to audit the HIDA and that the HIDA must open its books up to the Office of Legislative Audits. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. Move the adoption of 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 439 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 790, Senator Augustine, Maryland Department of Health Work Group to implement early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment requirements. Favorable to amendments.
Recognizing Senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 790, as amended, requires the Behavioral Health Advisory Council and the Commission on Behavioral Health Treatment and Access through a specified work group that already exists under the Council and Commission to provide recommendations to implement specified early and periodic screening, diagnostic, and treatment requirements. The Council and Commission, through the work group, must consult with certain stakeholders. The Maryland Department of Health must report the findings and recommendations by January 1st, 2026. There are 2 committee amendments. The first is technical. The second strikes provisions requiring the Department of Health to establish a new work group, requires the existing work group to consult with specified stakeholders, and alters the report's due date. Move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Now to the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 790 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 846, Senator Heddleman, Business Regulations, Cellular Phone Carriers, Service Contract Requirement. Favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 37th District as the floor leader, who is on his cell phone.
Apologize, colleagues, Mr. President. Cell phone is down now. Thank you. Senate Bill 846, as amended, requires a cellular phone carrier to allow the, I got the right bill, right? Okay. I just want to make sure I had that correct. Well, it's funny. You have the cellular bill while I'm on the cell phone. No, great.
There it is. Took a second. There we are.
I'm just getting started. Okay, Senate Bill 846, as amended, requires a cellular phone carrier to allow the customer of record on an account to designate other individuals as authorized users on the account, husbands, wives, family members, and to allow an authorized user on an account to purchase services or devices and take additional action under a service contract connected to the account of the authorization provided by the customer of record extends to the action. In other words, that person would be able to purchase a phone on the account. The First Amendment is technical. The Second Amendment strikes the bill as introduced and becomes the bill as described. There's no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report. Thank you for your patience.
Excellent. All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. I remember this incident from the interim. So, all right, on the amendments, any objection to the amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 846 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 900, Senator Augustine, Maryland Behavioral Health Crisis Response Systems, integration of 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline Network and outcome evaluations. Favorable with 2 amendments.
Just a little side comment on that bill. There needs to be a way to be able to send the 2-factor authentication to somebody else too, because I feel like that's the other. You try to change something on a bill, you got to get the password, you have to call the person, you call your, anyway. All right, on to the Vice Chair, Finance, floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 900, as amended, alters the program and reporting requirements of the Crisis Response System. Each crisis communication system must coordinate with the national 988 services. Additionally, each crisis communication center must provide an evaluation of outcomes of services in each jurisdiction or region as specified. The data derived from the evaluation must be collected, analyzed, and publicly reported by December 1st annually, beginning in 2026. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 clarifies Maryland versus National 988 entities, adds that Maryland 988 call, text, chat centers must coordinate with mobile crisis response and stabilization and other immediate services, and refines law enforcement engagement data elements and the vehicle for consumer experience reporting. I move the amendments, Mr. President, and the adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 900 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Senator from the 27th.
We're at the end of the calendar, correct?
We are.
I'd like to continue with my introductions. Earlier, the gallery was full, and so I did not have the opportunity to introduce another individual. Mr. Kerry Somerville, that's Trey's dad. They weren't able to get in a little earlier. I just want us to give them a warm Senate welcome.
Excellent. Welcome. Welcome. Great to see you all. All right, let's, I think this is the last one for finance of the day. Number 23. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 400, Senator Guile, Residential Child Care Programs, Transportation Companies, Regulation Preventing Abduction in Youth Transport Act of 2025. Favorable, 1 amendment.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 400, as amended, prohibits youth transportation companies from using visual impairments or physical or mechanical strains while transporting children to residential child care programs. Residential child care programs include boot camps, educational therapeutic boarding schools, and behavior modification programs, but do not include state facilities. The Attorney General or an individual is authorized to bring an action against a youth transportation company for violations of the bill's prohibitions. The amendment is technical and clarifying, excludes children in the care or custody of the state, clarifies that restraints may be mechanical and the circumstances when restraints may be necessary, excludes transportation companies under contract with the Department of Human Services from the prohibition of picking up children between specified hours. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. The bill passed the committee unanimously. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 1 committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 400 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1013, Senator Attar, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages License Extension. Favorable.
Recognize the senator from Baltimore City is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1013 is a local bill that extends the expiration of a Class BD7 license issued for the premises on Falls Road in Baltimore City to July 2026 to complete a transfer of ownership and the renewal at the same location. The bill is supported by the Baltimore City Senate delegation. There are no amendments. There was no opposition in the committee hearing. I move the adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1013 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 1039, Senator Sidnor, Alcoholic Beverages Class 5 Breweries On-Premise Consumption. Favorable.
Recognize the senator from District 8 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1039 is a statewide alcohol bill that raises the on-premise sales cap for Class 5 breweries from 25% to 35%. The change allowed the only Class 5 brewery in the state to increase the number of barrels it can bring from another location or affiliates to sell at the brewery. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1039 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go to, oh, we don't have budget and tax here. All right, we do have, nope, okay, we'll hold on that one. Do we have JPR ready? JPR, where are we? Well, let's see, maybe we can do budget and tax. Let's see if who we have as floor leaders here. Let's go to calendar 8. Calendar 8. Clerk will read the first bill, report number 8 out of budget and tax.
Senate Bill 105, Senator Kagan, Green and Renewable Energy for Nonprofit Organizations, Loan Program and Fund, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Budget and taxation is ready to go.
Excellent.
But Senate Bill 105 is very similar to a bill that passed last year unanimously. This is not a mandate; it just authorizes funding through SEEF to go through green and renewable energy. There are 2, and providing no interest loans to non-for-profits. Good piece of legislation. There are 2 amendments. One is technical, and the second just moves the administration of the program to the Maryland Clean Energy Center. I move the 2 committee amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 105 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 278, Senator Simon Nair, Tax Relief and Pensions Equality for Service Members Act, favorable 2 amendments.
All right, recognize the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Senate Bill 278, as amended, really just goes through and adopts definitions, makes uniform definitions related to the military across the general provisions, local government, state personnel and pensions, tax general, tax property articles of the code, and just refers them to what they are in the U.S. code. They also make certain provisions more broadly applicable to additional service members from the Public Health Service and from NOAA. Amendment 1 makes technical changes to the title. Amendment 2 adds provisions related to the reinstatement to employment for returning veterans. It strikes changes to provisions that have narrower application related to discharge from service. It strikes provisions related to military service credit in the state retirement and pension system, and authorizations for property tax credits for disabled veterans for further review over the interim, and it also adds co-sponsors. Move for the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Yes, recognize the senator from District 9 on the amended report.
I have an amendment.
Just a moment. Let's see if there's anything on the report. Any objections to the report? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there, the senator has an amendment that pages will collect and distribute. Very complicated. Senator may explain the sponsor amendment.
Simply as a co-sponsor.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Any objections? Without objection. Oh, no objections, no objections. Without objection, the amendment is adopted. All right, any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 278 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 605, Senator Zucker, Digital Advertising, Gross Revenues Tax, Assessments, Appeals, and Corrections, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 605 just allows, when it comes to digital advertising, gross revenues, typically it has to go to a court if there's any discrepancies. This just provides the opportunity for the comptroller to intervene. This puts it in line with all other taxes. We've worked this out with the comptroller's office as well. As there's no opposition, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 605 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's stick with budget and tax to report number 9. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 849, Senator Gazzone, Professional Volunteer Firefighter Innovative Cancer Screening Technologies Program funding, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognize the Senator from Montgomery County is the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I in particular want to thank the Budget and Taxation Committee for allowing me all this exercise. We've been sitting for a while. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, Senate Bill 849 is really goes not only a thank you to our brave men and women who are on the front line, but provides authorizing language for the governor when it comes to screening for cancer. It would put at least $3 million into the fund, and there's other mechanisms in which the funding would go to in terms of cancer screening and effectiveness. There are two amendments. One makes technical questions, technical corrections. The second just clarifies that 20% of the fund should be used, including go to the University of Maryland Institute for Health and Computing. So I would move the 2 committee amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 849 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 861, Senator Quarterman, Economic Development, Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Board, and Senator George C. Edwards Fund alterations, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognize the Senator from District 2 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 861 alters the Western Maryland Economic Future Investment Program, more commonly known as the George Board. It modifies the membership of the Western Maryland Fund. It alters the purpose and eligible uses of the money in the fund, and it alters the project evaluation criteria. There are 2 amendments. The first is technical. The second strikes a continuation of the mandated appropriation. We understand these times are challenging economic times. We allowed this to be authorizing. We appreciate the support of the administration and look forward to that continue to be support. So we move the adoption of the committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 861 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go to judicial proceedings here. This is report number 19. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 207, Chair, Judicial Proceedings, Drunk and Drug Impaired Driving and Failure to Remain at Scene, Revocation of a Driver's License, favorable with 4 amendments.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this departmental bill expands the list of circumstances under which the MVA is required to revoke an individual's driver's license to include convictions for certain drunk or drug driving offenses resulting in the death of or life-threatening injury to another person, or the failure to remain at the scene where someone dies or has serious bodily injury. There are 4 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 removes a requirement for the MVA to revoke an individual's license for a PBJ. Amendment number 3 adds authorization for an individual to file a reinstatement application after 2 years after the revocation. Amendment number 4 removes a part of the bill that expanded mandatory participation in the ignition interlock program. Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report and the 4 amendments.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 207 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 600, Senator McCray, Baltimore City Stop Sign Monitoring Systems Authorization, favorable with 3 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 26th District as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me grab that. Colleagues, as amended, this bill authorizes for 5 years the use of stop sign monitoring systems on state and local highways located in a school zone in the 45th Legislative District to record violations of state law requiring obedience to stop signs and similar to an existing authorization for place in place for Prince George's County. There are 3 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 alters the short title of the bill. Amendment number 2 is technical. Amendment number 3 limits use of systems to the 45th Legislative District and requires that 50% of the revenues from systems go to the local management board, the Baltimore City, to be used for youth programming, very important, in the 45th Legislative District. I move favorable the amendment in the bill.
I know. The floor leader moves.
Oh yeah, well.
Moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the committee amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 600 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Careful when you're driving in East Baltimore, I tell you this. South Baltimore, do whatever you got to do. You know what I'm saying? All right, yes, whoops. Okay, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 707, Senator Zucker, Vehicle Laws, Medical Exemption for Enhanced Tinted Windows, Repeal of Time Limitation, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the Senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill provides that a written certification from a licensed physician authorizing an individual to use enhanced tinted windows on their vehicle due to a medical condition is valid indefinitely if the physician determines that the medical condition is permanent. Currently, all certifications are valid for 2 years. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 provides that the written certification is only valid indefinitely if the medical condition is permanent. Move the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader will move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any yes, recognizing the senator, other senator from Montgomery County has a question.
Would the floor leader yield
Senator
for
may
a quick
proceed.
question? I'm sorry I'm saying this just right this second. Could you just tell us, would that allow all windows to be tinted or just the windshield or driver's window? How would that work?
So it does, for the car, it allows all of them to be tinted. And what the point of this is that there are some who have medical conditions. Like we heard testimony from a father whose child has a medical condition where their eyes are so incredibly sensitive to the light, and the physician has determined that this is a permanent condition. The windows are allowed to be tinted under law, but they have to go back every 2 years. So that's what this bill does.
And there are no sunglasses that are powerful enough to help them address this condition?
Well, the challenge is it's a skin issue, and as well as it affects their eyes.
Okay, who knew? I'm thinking about our courageous law enforcement personnel needing to walk up to a vehicle with tinted windows and not being able to see what's inside and whether they're carrying a weapon or something. So that was my concern and the reason for my question.
Yeah, with the floor leader yield?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I mean, so all this does is, so right now, it doesn't change anything that's happening right now, but what's happened is someone with a permanent condition has to go every 2 years to the doctor, and they have to say, yep, it's still permanent. And then 2 years later, they go back, they're like, yep, your condition's still permanent.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Senator from District 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to point out also that this does not include the front windshield. It can only go to what's called the ASI line. So I apologize. It's already in the law that way. So it can only go to that ASI 5 inches down from the automotive safety. It's the tinting that's on your the top of your windshield. So it can only go down 5 inches. So you cannot tint your front windshield in any circumstance. Thank you.
All right. On the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 707 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 711, Senator McKay, Off-Highway Recreational Vehicle, Recreational Oversight Board, Establishment, favorable to 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Senate Bill 711 establishes a off-highway recreational vehicle oversight board. This is going to work with the Department of Natural Resources on the operation, acquisition, regulations, and general oversight of the OHRV trails and recreation in the great state of Maryland. There was actually 2 committee reports. One was technical. The second one removed the provision where it required the board to review all expenditures of the off-highway recreational vehicle trail fund. This puts it in the posture with every other advisory group when it comes to the Department of Natural Resources. Mr. President, I move that we accept the amended favorable report. Thank you.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 711 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 721, Senator Henson, Family Law, Permanent Protective Orders, Consent, favorable.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, in 2018, this body adopted the issuance of permanent protective orders. Protective orders are civil orders that can be issued when someone has an intimate partner and they're seeking relief from abuse from that intimate partner. The difference in permanent protective orders is that the duration is a lifetime duration. What we overlooked in that original permanent protective order statute was the ability to enter into it by consent. So this really is a simple bill that says you can obtain a permanent protective order by consent. Move for the favorable committee report.
Interesting. All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 721 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 765, Senator Zucker, Out-of-Home Placement Providers, Maximum Number of Children Exemption, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 34th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a simple and common sense bill. It has 2 amendments. One is technical and the other obviates the needs for regulations, and this is how the bill will work. A foster youth away at college or training can return to their foster home during scheduled breaks if they get permission from DHS. No opposition. Vote was unanimous. No fiscal impact. I move the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 765 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 828, Senator Smith, Immigration Enforcement, Sensitive Locations, Guidelines and Policies Protecting Sensitive Locations Act, favorable with 3 amendments.
Recognizing chair of the bill is chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As amended, this bill requires that a public school, public library, or unit of the executive branch that operates at a specified sensitive location deny access to any area of the location not accessible to the general public to any individual seeking to enforce federal immigration law unless that individual presents a valid judicial warrant or exigent circumstances exist. In addition, the bill requires the Attorney General to develop and publish guidance regarding immigration enforcement at sensitive locations. Public schools, public libraries, and units of the executive branch that operate at sensitive locations are required to implement that policy consistent with that guidance. Mr. President, there are 3 amendments. One is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes the bill as drafted and substitutes the provisions that I just described above. And amendment number 3 removes the provision making the bill an emergency bill and substitutes the effective date for July 1st, 2025. Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, question for the floor leader on the amendments?
I'm going to lay it over.
Lay it over.
I was going to ask if the bill and the amendments lie over under the rules.
All right. The floor leader is moved to lay over the bill. It's in order. The bill and the amendments will lie over under the rule. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 834, Senator Waldstreicher, Vehicle Laws, Manufacturer Dealers, Prices Listed on Dealer Websites, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an interesting bill. When manufacturers of cars give money to the dealers in order to advertise those cars, they require those dealers to not list the prices under a certain predetermined amount. Now, whether you agree with that policy as being two sophisticated actors contracting with each other, or you disagree with that policy because you think it's anti-competitive, we can all agree that dealers should be able to say that they may be able to get a lower price if they go directly to the dealer. And so that's what this bill does. It just allows our dealers who are located in our communities to say on their website, you may be able to get a lower price, by contacting the dealer. There are no committee amendments. The bill passed unanimously in committee. Mr. President, I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. Let's see who is paying attention. Yeah. All right. Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 834 is hereby ordered, printed for third reading. All right, let's go to, stay with judicial proceedings. Report number 20. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 432, the President, Criminal Records, Expungement, and Maryland Judiciary Case Search, Expungement Reform Act of 2025, favorable, 4 amendments.
Yes, recognize the Vice Chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this administration bill does 4 things. It alters various statutory provisions related to the filing of a petition for expungement under 10-105 and 1010 of the Criminal Procedure Article. 2, it expands the list of misdemeanor convictions eligible for expungement. 3, it expands the factors a court must consider for expungement under those provisions. 4, it prohibits Maryland Judiciary Case Search from referring in any way to a charge resulting in a null pros with required drug or alcohol treatment, a charge marked STET on the docket for at least 3 years previously, and charges of possession of cannabis if the charge resulted in a conviction that was later pardoned by the governor of the state of Maryland. There are 4 committee amendments, Mr. President. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters provisions relating to a court's determination as to whether a person is entitled to expungement under 10-105. Amendment number 3 strikes provisions of the bill adding to the list of offenses eligible for expungement. And amendment number 4 alters the effective date of a section of the bill. Mr. President, I move the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 4 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the floor leader would yield for some questions.
Appears so. Senator,
happy
to
do so.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit, first of all, you mentioned some of the criminal law articles there's like that are in the bill.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I see 16-101 of the transportation article. I see 8-106 and 8-204 of criminal law article. Looks like we struck a couple things. The committee did. Can you just talk about what's in those
sure
crimes?
So here's what's out after the bill has been amended.
Yeah, that probably is helpful.
Counterfeit prescriptions is now out of the bill. Resisting arrest, out of the bill. False statement to an officer, out of the bill. False statement to an officer while under arrest, which is a separate offense, also out of the bill. So those 4 are out. Here's what remains in the bill. Issuing or passing a bad check, credit card theft, driving without a license. So 4 are out, 3 remain.
And once someone's complete, okay, that's good. And once someone has completed their right now they have to wait. Is it in some cases 3 years, in some cases 5 years?
In some cases 8, in some cases 15. This bill does not alter the time period in which they need to wait.
Well, no, doesn't it say they can apply for expungement at the end of their upon completion of their sentence?
It does not. The sentence includes the parole and probation,
and the probation period,
and then the waiting period.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't change the waiting period.
Correct.
I was reading it here. Okay.
Yep.
So functionally, what does this bill do? It says these are now eligible for expungement, and they were not before.
Happy to answer that question. So this comes from a case that many of you have heard about. It's called the Abhishek case. Mr. Abhishek was a real human being who had a conviction on his record. During the term of his probation, he had a violation for utilizing marijuana, a substance which is now legal in the state of Maryland. 20 years later, Mr. Abhishek has reformed his life, looking to be a productive member of society, a taxpayer in Maryland, and went to expunge his record. The judge indicated that because of the marijuana violation, a minor, some might say technical violation, he was ineligible for expungement. And
What was his, do you mind if I ask what was his underlying crime?
So
I'm just curious how it works, not to cast aspersions. Was it?
I'm not sure if we know what the underlying crime is, we'll find that out. But
it was expungible otherwise.
Must have been relatively minor because
Right.
it was expungible. We don't allow the expungement of major
Yes.
violent offenses. So the original offense was relatively minor, but most importantly for our purposes, the violation of parole or probation was minor. It was marijuana use. And then a court, interpreting our then current statute, quite literally said, this person unfortunately is ineligible. So what we're doing in this bill, what the administration seeks to do, is to essentially put us back into what we understood our case law and statutory scheme to be before Abhishek.
So what was that understanding before Abhishek?
Yeah, what that world is the judge is allowed to make a determination about whether the violation should or should not allow the person to have the expungement. So it doesn't say the violation is irrelevant. The judge is allowed to consider it, but neither is it determinative.
So all this bill really does is that, or is there something more to this bill?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So what you've just described, is that the entire substance of what this bill now does as if we adopt the committee amendments?
It does not. That is the core of the bill,
Okay.
To reverse the Abhishek decision. Just so you know, we found out that his original offense was theft under $500. So he was trying to expunge
Minor
a
theft,
petty
right,
theft,
right.
and then another petty offense, the use of marijuana.
Because
prevented
you
him
could
from
expunge, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to talk over you. You can expunge petty theft, for example, after what, 5 years, or is it?
I imagine that that's correct.
Or
It's
in
3
that-
years. Yes.
3 years, 3 years, 5 years, okay.
Okay, so what else does the bill do?
Yeah.
It expands those, what is expungible, the 3 offenses that you and I talked about earlier. And then I think one of the least controversial but also most important part of the bill is, as you know, over the summer, the governor pardoned a number of people who have minor marijuana offenses. A pardon in Maryland does not automatically trigger an expungement, so this bill essentially takes a pardon and transmutes it into an expungement-like thing where it takes it off of case search if you've been pardoned by the governor for your offense.
Yeah, and that actually does make a lot of sense. I'll take a little closer look at the bill. I appreciate the answers to the question. And could you just repeat one more time, what offenses are now being allowed to be expunged?
Under the bill, 3
As
offenses are being added. Issuing or passing a bad check, that's 8106. Credit card theft, that's 8204. And driving without a license, that's 16101.
And you'd be allowed to expunge these upon completion of whatever your sentence, including probation and waiting period. The waiting period for those would be what, 5 years?
5 years.
After you've completed your probation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, for committee amendments, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 4 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 432 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 586, Senator Muse, Cooperations and Associations, Methodist Church Trust Requirement Repeal, favorable to amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, as amended, this bill repeals provisions of existing law that require all assets owned by any Methodist church to be held in trust for the United Methodist Church and subject to the discipline, usage, and ministerial appointments of the church. The amended bill also provides generally that a local church may disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church and retain ownership of its property. That's now the law as well, which it wasn't a year or so ago. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 establishes provisions related to a disaffiliating church. The bill's amendments provide that in general, a local church may disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church and retain its own property. Let me repeat that that is now also a part of the law of the Methodist Church, and it was not the case last year. However, a disaffiliating local church is required to reimburse the conference for financial investments made by the conference for the acquisition, maintenance, or improvement of real property used by the local church. The conference is required to provide a disaffiliating local church with a full and transparent accounting of all funds the conference has contributed for the acquisition, maintenance, and improvement of real property used by the local church in order to determine the amount of reimbursement required. A disaffiliating local church may not be required to reimburse the conference for any amounts attributable to financial investments for the acquisition, maintenance, or renovation of real property made by the local church. The current law is all assets owned by the Methodist Church, including those specified, whether incorporated, unincorporated, or abandoned, are number one, held by the trustees of the church in trust for the Methodist Church, and number two, subject to the discipline, usage, and appointments of the Methodist Church. The absence of a trust clause in any deed or other conveyance executed before June 1953 does not relieve a local church from its Methodist connectional responsibility. If such an intent of the founders or the later congregations and boards of trustees was indicated by the conveyance of the assets to the trustees of the local church or any of its predecessors, the use of the name, customs, and polity of the Methodist Church. What this does, the General Conference has allowed churches to leave the United Methodist Church. They can now do that. In fact, down south, over 7,600 churches left at one time, and they're still leaving. In the Baltimore area, what is different is that those churches here, if they want to leave, are required to pay 50% of the building costs. So if your building is $6 million, you have to pay $3 million, and you have to do that in a small period of time. The clause held in trust is what enables them, what enables, I'm going to say, the mother church from this point on to do that. The win-win here is that that clause will not be removed, and for those churches who want to remain, then their assets are still held in trust for the Methodist Church. For those who are leaving, it seems like they're held hostage because many of these congregations are 100, 200 years old, etc. They did not, and back before there was a United Methodist Church, not before 1972, they all owned their own buildings. What this does is to say, if you want to leave, if the conference, the mother church, has put money into your church, you have to pay that back. Number two, if they put nothing into your church at all, then you're free to leave. That's essentially what the bill does in part of the history. Move for the amendment, favorable report on the amendments and on the bill.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report, recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know I was just up, but this is an interesting issue because I think several of our offices have probably received emails on both sides of this bill. And so I just want to be sure I understand. Excellent explanation, I think. The bill as it came in was basically wiping away all arrangements, essentially.
Well, not really. Not really, because the General Conference actually did that. That is the mother church. The General Conference that governs the church worldwide essentially came up with 3 ways that churches could disaffiliate with the church. So prior to that, what you said would be correct. No church could leave.
And now they could, but
now
it's still incredibly cumbersome.
It's cumbersome for this area.
And your goal with the bill originally was to try to make it a lot less cumbersome. But what you've done with these amendments, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is you've said you can leave. You aren't going to be held like you have to give them back half of the cost of your building. You do have to reimburse them for anything that that the conference has put towards your infrastructure building, and you have a reasonable amount of time to do that.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, which I think is fair for both, because if you do owe them back,
it's a win-win, right?
But you can get your freedom if you've decided to disaffiliate for whatever reason. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, questions on the two committee amendments, recognizing the Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to lay this bill over for a possible amendment.
Okay, Senator, the motion is automatic, so the bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. Let's go to AAA. All right, this is report number 15. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 186, Senator Bailey, Commercial Blue and Flathead Catfish, Finfish Trot Line License, Prohibited Regulations, favorable to 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 35th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, Senate Bill 186 requires the Department of Natural Resources to establish an invasive blue catfish pilot program to curb the spread of the invasive blue catfish in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. The amended bill establishes requirements for the components of the pilot program, including the for-hire commercial blue catfish program and the mid and lower bay blue catfish trout line program. The pilot program terminates on June 30th, 2026. There are 2 committee amendments. The first amendment adds a co-sponsor and makes technical changes. Second amendment strikes the original provisions of the bill and instead establishes the pilot program as described previously. I'd like to move the 2 committee amendments and ask for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments, without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 186 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 335, Senator Bailey, Natural Resources, Canada Geese, Bag Limits, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the Vice Chair as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a conservation measure. In parts of our state, population is growing, and therefore the number of hunters are growing, and therefore some of our fowl, including Canadian geese, are diminishing. And so this puts bag limits, modifies the bag limits. There are 2 amendments. The first one is technical. The second one clarifies the parts of our state that this covers and also adds a 5-year sunset so we can take another look and see if this is still needed. Move adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Just wondering if we should send a letter to Canada to say, hey, we're the state right now. All right, floor leaders move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 335 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 363, Senator Bailey, Maryland Agriculture Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, Oyster Shucking House Loan Program, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 35th as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 363 increases the amount from $10,000 to $25,000 that the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, better known as MARBIDCO, may loan per seasonal full-time job. That's projected to be created or retained under the Maryland Oyster Shucking House Loan Fund. The bill also reduces the number of years from 5 to 3 that a person must have been a licensed seafood dealer in order to be eligible for loans under the program. There are no committee amendments. I move for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 363 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 375, Senator Kramer, Agriculture, Roosters, Restrictions, favorable 2 amendments.
Recognize the Vice Chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Okay, we have an animal protection bill here. As eggs are getting more and more crazy expensive and not being fixed yet, there are more and more of our neighbors who are keeping chickens and roosters in their backyards. And it is already, I can't believe the senator from District 19 isn't here to hear this. That makes me, oh, there he is. Okay. So it is already illegal to host a cockfight, to attend a cockfight, but this is about rooster housing, and you can't keep them all penned up together and treat them inhumanely. So that's what this bill does. There are 2 committee amendments to this excellent animal protection bill. The first is technical, and the second, rather than the Department of Agriculture doing the enforcement, it'll be local animal control and sets up the penalties. So move adoption of the 2 committee amendments, Mr. President, and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Senator from District 7 has a question for the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a serious question for the floor leader.
Senator may proceed.
As much fun as I can have with this bill, now in all seriousness, 4-H'ers, I just want to make sure we're okay with 4-H'ers who truly raise chickens to go show to the fair, where sometimes they will have roosters and hens that they're raising that they do keep in smaller pens for show season. Is there an exemption for them to be able to take care of that during show season, to have them in their sheds and stuff?
So I can
that
defer to
purpose.
the sponsor of the bill, but I don't think transport is an issue. This is really about housing them in inhumane ways and having them jammed into small crates for extended period of time. But Senator,
if the floor leader would
please.
yield, thank you.
Senator may proceed.
Yes, there is a long list of exemptions under the bill to include specifically 4-H and similar activities. And in fact, there was no opposition at the hearing from any individual or group because of the very clear itemized lists of the exclusions. This is specifically targeting raising roosters for the purpose of cockfighting.
Completely understand. I just want to make sure we're not excluding the kids that do raise these, and sometimes they'll have multiple roosters.
Correct.
Just for show purposes.
Correct.
Thanks.
All right. Question remains on the 2 committee amendments. Any further discussion on the amendments? Recognize the senator from District 1 on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the floor leader could rise
Will the
for a
floor
question,
yield? Senator may
please.
proceed.
Of course.
So I do believe I have this correct, so that's what I'm just asking. I'm just making sure that through this bill, we will make sure that we're outlawing solitary confinement for roosters.
Is that a JPR joke? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Questions on the 2 amendments? Any discussion? Any objections to the amendments? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 375 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 449, Senator Folden, Frederick, and Washington counties bow hunting, openly carrying handguns, favorable with 1 amendment.
Floor leader. To the floor leader.
Oh.
Senator for 23rd District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill specifies that the Department of Natural Resources may not prohibit a licensed bow hunter from openly carrying a handgun that the hunter is otherwise authorized to carry if the bow hunter is hunting in Frederick or Washington counties during deer hunting season and meets specified requirements currently applicable to a bow hunter carrying a handgun while hunting in Deer Management Region A. There's 1 committee amendment. The amendment alters the bill's sponsorship to be that of Frederick County senators. There is no fiscal impact. I move the amended and favorable committee report.
The floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Recognizing the senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to request that we have this bill, Senate Bill 449, laid over until the appropriate time tomorrow.
All right, the senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. Clerk, read the next bill.
Thank you.
Bill 718, Senator Carrozza, Somerset County Code of Public Local Laws, 2025 edition, legalization, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 718 is a local bill from Somerset County, and the bill legalizes the 2025 edition of the Somerset County Code of Public Local Laws and any supplement to it that contains laws enacted by the General Assembly. There are no committee amendments. There is no fiscal impact. Move adoption of a favorable committee report for Senate Bill 718.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 718 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 946, Senator Carrozza, Endangered and Threatened Species, Incidental Taking, Bats, favorable with one amendment.
Interesting. Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 946 is a bat conservation bill, thus the attire. Senate Bill 946 would allow the Department of Natural Resources to establish a permit process to allow for the incidental takings of the northern long-eared bat, the tricolored bat, or the Indiana bat, and as amended, requested by the Department of Natural Resources, the eastern small-footed bat. This process would include the approval of a habitat conservation plan, and it would ensure a balanced approach to both conservation and forest management that is already practiced at the federal level under the Endangered Species Act. There is one committee amendment. It adds the eastern small-footed bat to the species covered under the bill, and it corrects the name of the tricolored bat. I move adoption of the one committee amendment and a favorable committee report on Senate Bill 946.
The very stylishly, appropriately stylish Senator, floor leader, moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. I couldn't quite tell with the green, but it turns out it's quite on point. All right, on the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 946 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We just need Robin, right? No? Come on. Anyone? Anyone? No, didn't get there. Thank you. Not even close. I mean, not even half. Yeesh. Rough crowd. All right. Let's go to Report 16. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 313, Senator M. Washington, Election Law, Post-Election Tabulation Audits, Risk Limiting Audits, favorable two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 313, Election Law, strengthens Maryland's election integrity because we already have a very good and solid system. By requiring the State Board of Elections, working with our local Board of Elections, to conduct what are called risk-limiting audits after each statewide election. Now, just some background, a warning, there might be a little bit of math and a little bit of statistics here, so those who have sensitive ears can close them. But a risk-limiting audit double checks the election results to ensure that the reported winner actually won, okay? So that the reported winner, or that the count can substantiate that the person who was declared the winner actually won. And instead of counting every ballot, a RLA randomly selects a small number of ballots and compares them to the official results. Okay. Now, this method improves election security and public trust by making these audits more efficient and also more cost-effective. Now, here's an example just to think about it. Imagine that you have a factory and your factory produces about 10,000 shirts a day. And instead of checking every single one of the shirts, you pull out 10 shirts or 15 shirts, and you expect those to make sure that they were done correctly. Now, if that sample is good, then you can likely feel confident that the rest of the shirts were made correctly. But if half of the shirts instead had some kind of default, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the shirts have a default. That just means that maybe we should just check again. So then you're going to pull a larger number to check again and see, does this larger number reflect the same sort of defects, or did you happen to just pull a first batch? So if there are too many, but if this second batch then says, oh, there's problems, so then that means you have to check them all. Now, we would apply that to elections. Instead of checking every single ballot, you would pull a sample, and then over time, in other words, we're not waiting for a complaint. We're not really waiting for somebody to say, oh, I think there was something wrong. We just do this as a part of the regular process of elections. We just do this and do it for statewide elections in cooperations with the locals. Over time, you can develop a pattern. You can develop you see how things usually occur there. And so we can check out if there are problems earlier. So again, and then we set up a process for addressing them. The bill was voted unanimously by the committee. There were two amendments, and I'm trying to read them. Thank you. There were two committee amendments. The first amendment is technical, and the second one removes the increase in the mandated funding, and it keeps the required appropriation at $150,000 per year. With the adoptions of these amendments, it is fiscally neutral. I ask the body for the adoption of the two committee amendments and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 313 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 574, Howard County Senators, Howard County Board of Education, Board Member Terms and Compensation Commission, Howard County 2-25.
Recognizing the senator from the 9th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a local Howard County bill. It alters the election process for members of the Howard County Board of Education to enable a staggered board member elections. By the time the bill is implemented, we would have 3 members being elected during the gubernatorial election years and 4 members being elected in the presidential election years. The bill also establishes the Howard County Board of Education Compensation Commission, staffed by the Howard County government, and authorizes the Howard County Council to, after reviewing the Commission's report, recommend by resolution an alteration to the salary of the school board members. There are no amendments, no fiscal note, and it was voted unanimously out of committee. I urge the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 574 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 789, Senator M. Washington, Higher Education Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program, alterations, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 43rd as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, you remember this bill from 2021 when we created the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program, that appropriates $150,000 a year to address the fact that there is food insecurity on our campuses and universities. As drafted, this bill sought to do 2 things. One was to increase the appropriation. The program is very successful, of course, and was needing of additional funds. And secondly, our private institutions reached out and said, we also have students on our campuses that are food insecure or would like to establish these programs. However, they said we don't need the appropriation. We believe that we can do an independent fundraising on our own, but we just need the designation. So this bill provides for that designation. However, the amendment to the bill withdraws the additional $100,000 appropriation and keeps it at $150,000. I move for the adoption of these amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Yes, recognize the Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could ask the floor leader to yield.
Yeah. Senator may proceed.
I heard you say the amendment keeps it at 150. Is this, what grants are these, where do these grants come from?
Right. Thank you for the question. So MHEC manages the program, and individual campuses can apply. The individual campuses are required to have some money in the game, so there's a certain percent that they also
match,
have to
kind of.
Not a full
Not
match,
50-50,
but
but
not 50, but something. We want something investment, because to run such a program takes time, and we didn't want it to just be added to something that someone else, and so we wanted to have it be a real program.
Okay, thank you. So the current $150,000 is the sum of the grant money that's available at MHEC, and it's funded in the budget. And then, for example, a Salisbury University or a Frostburg could get a grant for $5,000 or $7,000 because and the money could go to help set up a grocery, like
a food pantry.
A food pantry.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 789 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 813, Howard County Senators, Howard Community College Board of Trustees, Meetings and Contracts, Alterations, Howard County 1-25, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from District 9 as the floor leader.
Thank you, colleagues. This is another local Howard County bill which expands and improves the Howard County Board and College of Trustees. There are 2 committee amendments. The first one strikes a drafting error that would have required the Howard County Senate delegation to appoint the board instead of the governor. It also requires the posting of the recording of the board meeting on the board's website and alters board training member requirements. It also strikes all provisions related to the contract of the Howard County College president. There is no fiscal note. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the 2 amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 813 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 885, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Board of Education, Vacancy Procedures, Alterations, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from the 41st District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This local bill would allow for the Carroll County Commissioners to appoint an individual to fill a vacancy on the Carroll County Board of Education, and the length of time that the person fills the vacancy depends on how close the vacancy occurs to the next election. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, and I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 885 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. That does it for that one. Let's go to calendar 17. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 116, Senator Lewis Young, Data Set Impact Analysis and Report, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As amended, this bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment and the University of Maryland School of Business, in coordination with the Department of Legislative Services, to conduct an analysis of the likely environmental and economic impacts of data center development in the state of Maryland. DLS must synthesize the assessments completed by MD and the University of Maryland School of Business into a final report and submit the report to the Governor and the General Assembly by September 1, 2026. The bill takes effect July 1, 2025 and terminates June 30, 2027. There are 2 amendments, Mr. President. The first amendment is technical. The second amendment removes the Maryland Energy Administration from the study and adds a data industry consultant and MEA as an agency that provides information for the study. So it makes that modification. With that, Mr. President, I'd move the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, recognize the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the floor leader would yield for just a quick couple questions.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you very much. As amended, you're taking out MEA, and it looks like all of the study language that related to energy usage and requirements was taken out. What's the rationale for that?
Where's my consultant here? Right. I think the intent here of the day of this particular legislation is to be much more targeted and focus primarily on environmental impacts, economic development, state tax revenue potential, and try to maybe not kind of get too broad and maybe just a bit more focused. And I think by having that in the bill, it just sort of, I won't say dilutes what we're really trying to get at, but I think that topic, I think, is the subject of potentially some other bills and some other studies and some other analysis. So this bill is, I think the design here is to be focused and targeted on the issues that are laid out in the bill as amended.
Okay, so it could be a little bit more. I do know Department of Environment is still in it, and then, as you said, University of Maryland School of Business. Appreciate that the amended language has consultation with industry experts to really get their evaluation that there could be a positive economic impact with respect to data centers. So you're focusing more on that than the potential of energy usage and what might happen to the grid from that perspective.
I think that's accurate,
Okay.
yes.
All right, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. All right, on the amendments, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Yes, recognizing Senator's amendment.
I do. It's a
One half
very
second too
substantive
early.
amendment.
On the amended report, any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. We have a very substantive, very detailed, long amendment from the minority whip. Pages are collecting and distributing. And Senator may explain the complicated amendment.
Thank you. I'm asking to add myself as a co-sponsor.
All right. Any objections?
I object.
Does the Senator actually object? Withdraws his with objection.
Mr. President, I remove that objection.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. President,
Chair.
after consultation with the committee and close call, we will accept this as a friendly amendment.
All
Yes.
right. The chair is graciously accepting this amendment. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 116 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 149, Senator Hester, responding to emergency needs from extreme weather, Renew Act of 2025, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the senator from District 9 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as you know, extreme weather in Maryland regularly costs the state tremendous amounts of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent across the state by local governments dealing with flooding, to schools having to spend millions to upgrade their air conditioning for summer heat. These costs are not theoretical. They are being paid right now, and they are contributing to Maryland's projected budget shortfall. They're real expenses hitting real budget line items today. We lack a comprehensive analysis to determine exactly how much these events are costing the state, and Senate Bill 149 will commission the first ever study to calculate the true financial impact of this crisis. So as amended, colleagues, Senate Bill 149 is now a study that produces a report to first summarize the various cost-driving effects of covered greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Second, to categorize and calculate the costs incurred and projected to be incurred by the state and its residents for each cost-driving effect. And third, to categorize and calculate the costs incurred and projected to be incurred by the state for residents for mitigation efforts. So this important study, colleagues, lays the groundwork to hold polluters accountable and shift the burden of paying for these increased costs from our taxpayers to the companies that caused the pollution in the first place. There are two committee amendments. The first amendment is the study, which I just talked about, and the second amendment strikes the original provisions of the bill and adds the study described above. I urge the adoption of the favorable committee report, the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question for the floor leader.
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
Do I understand you're going to offer another amendment once these are accepted?
I do. I have an amendment to the amendment.
Okay, then why don't we do that, and then I'll question after that. Okay, thank you.
All right, on the amendments, on the committee amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. The Senator, floor leader, and sponsor of the bill has a amendment that the pages are collecting and distributing. Give us just a moment.
So colleagues, this amendment shifts the leadership of the study to the Comptroller's office, who is really excited about doing the study. The Comptroller will consult with the Department of the Environment and the Department of Commerce, and the Comptroller will lead the study to determine how much damage climate change is causing in Maryland, with a report due in December of 2026. It also strikes the interim report, and it adds a clause at the end about an economic analysis to determine whether there would be a cost to taxpayers.
All right. Senator moves the amendment, recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The floor leader would yield for questions on the amendment, please.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you. So with the amendment now, the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability is out, and it is now a study being run by the Comptroller, MDE, and Department of Commerce.
That is correct. In the amendment just distributed, though, the Comptroller may hire a consultant to support the study.
Okay, so why are we determining that the Comptroller's office is the appropriate department to be running this type of study?
You know, this is a financial issue, and therefore we need to calculate the amount of damage that both the state has incurred and the state will incur, and the state must pay to mitigate the damages. Ultimately, this is a taxpayer protection bill, and we need, and the Comptroller decided that, you know, it was something that that could be taken on by her office.
Okay. In your opening statements about the bill itself, you talked about extreme weather events and their effects on flooding and different things like that. Is the Comptroller's office being asked to prove that nexus as well too, or is that being assumed that greenhouse gas emissions released in the state of Maryland are causing extreme weather events?
Thank you for the question. The study has three components. The first part of the study is a summary of the various cost-driving effects of covered greenhouse gas emissions on the state. This includes the effects on public health, natural resources, biodiversity, agriculture, economic development, flood preparedness, safety, and housing, and any other effect in consultation with the bodies. The type of entity I think that would have to be hired, I've talked to one of them that would have to be hired to help with this assessment, is somebody who has expertise and has done this kind of assessment and calculation before.
All right, and again, I know that the broader bill has been stricken now, what the original
Painfully,
intent
yes.
was of the bill, but now we're looking at that. And is it safe to assume that we are looking for a study to justify bringing back a bill of this magnitude and implementing it?
There is nothing in the bill before you that says that has to happen.
Okay, but the part of the amendment that you did offer does talk about an economic analysis to determine whether there would be a cost passed on to taxpayers as a result of each fossil fuel company that has a significant nexus to the state and emitted more than 1 million or 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So that is letting the Comptroller's office know that there is an intent, depending on their study, to see if this quote unquote carbon tax could be implemented and what could happen as a result of that. Is that accurate or not?
I would say it's not accurate. Maryland has direct experiences making large out-of-state companies pay to clean up the cost of damages in Maryland without passing along the cost to consumers. For example, the Sand, Gravel, and Stone Superfund site in Maryland required responsible parties to pay more than $50 million. Those responsible parties included General Motors and Pfizer, and these giant out-of-state companies that paid into the fund because they were required to, they did not pass that cost onto their consumers because the competitors were not raising their prices.
Okay, but again, even what you're talking about right then is the potential to get a study that's going to lead towards the bill that was originally submitted? I mean,
Yes, there is potential that this study could be used to do that.
To do that
But
bill.
that cost will not be passed on to consumers.
well, there's going to be an analysis on whether or not that could be done or not. And
Sorry, I have read studies that show that, you know, the economic analysis says that it won't be. To be extra special clear, we want to do that for the state of Maryland because it has not yet been done for the state of Maryland.
Okay, okay. And thank you. And just final question, because it is being brought up, and the bill has been heavily amended, but it does provide a mandated study. It does require the Comptroller's Office, MDE, Department of Commerce, and now a consultant. Did the the Comptroller's Office come back with a fiscal note on what it would cost them to run this study?
The Department of the Comptroller's Office did not come back, but the study is not actually that much different in what it is producing compared to what was in the original fiscal note. In the original fiscal note on page 9,
right,
it references a Vermont study, which is of comparable size. That cost $500,000. And I believe it would take more than 1 year to complete the study.
Right, and so in the original fiscal summary, there was conversation about a number of that extent as well too. So then again, this would have a mandated appropriation to study of about 500,000. 500,000, is that the number we're saying?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years, okay. And you said this, the Comptroller's Office just had that in their original bill, but have they been consulted on whether or not the bill as amended would still provide that same requirement? They still had that same requirement of even having to now bring on a consultant to help with that?
I have not asked them that specific question yet.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Okay. Why don't, Mr. President, if we could just have the bill and the amendment lie over under the rule, and sponsor and I can get together on just what that final cost would be.
All right, Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 867, Senator Hester, Cyber Maryland Program revisions, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from District 9 as floor leader.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm rapidly shifting gears here. Did you know that the Maryland, D.C. region has both the highest demand for cybersecurity professionals and the most significant talent shortage? In fact, every year we have between 6,000 and 10,000 unfilled jobs across the state of Maryland. So a couple years ago in 2023, we created the Cyber Maryland program. And what this bill before you does is it transfers the Cyber Maryland program from the Maryland Technology Development Corporation to the Maryland Department of Labor. It also repeals mandated funding and authorizes a fiscal 2026 discretionary appropriation for the fund. There are 2 committee amendments. The first amendment is technical. The second amendment adds and removes entities from the funds provision and clarifies those provisions. It adds board members, adds reporting requirements, and strikes the mandatory funding provisions of the bill. This bill passed our committee unanimously. I move the committee amendments and urge the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report on the amendments. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 867 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. All right, let's go to the special order calendars. We've got calendar number 32. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 338, Senator West, Baltimore County Speed Monitoring Systems, Interstate 695 and Interstate 83. Bill is on 2nd reading and open to amendment.
All right, Senator has an amendment. All right, the pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank my colleagues, the gentleman from District 40 and the gentlewoman from District 41 for working with me on this amendment. As originally drafted, the bill provided that on the Baltimore Beltway, which is 43 miles long, there would be up to 8 speed cameras, 4 in each direction. As amended in this amendment, we're going to reduce that to 6 speed cameras, 3 in each direction, and add to that the provision that only 2 of them can be operating at the same time, going that direction. The original bill provided for up to 6 speed cameras on I-83 North between the Beltway and the Pennsylvania line, which is 28 miles long. 6 of those, 3 in each direction. As provided in this amendment, we're reducing that to 4, 2 in each direction, and also provide that only 1 of those can be operable at any single time. So with that explanation, I move the amendment.
Senator, is that 1 in each direction? On the
Yes.
83? 1 in each direction.
1 in each direction. So if you're driving north, you go 28 miles, you'll
One
pass
of them
1
would be-
operable speed camera on your trip to the Pennsylvania line.
Got it. Thank you. All right, on the amendment, yes, recognize the Senator from Baltimore County.
Just a question for the
Senator may proceed.
Just to make certain, this is just for I-83. This amendment, it doesn't affect 695.
No, I'm sorry, if I didn't explain it clearly, it affects both, and it's in 2 components. So I-85, the original bill provided for up to 8 speed cameras, 4 in each direction. As amended in this amendment, will provide for only 6 speed cameras, 3 in each direction on I-695. 3 in each direction. 695 is 43 miles long. So if you drive from one end all the way to the other, you would pass 3 speed cameras, but under this amendment, only 2 of those could be operable at any one time.
And that's outside of, let's say, work zone cameras?
Yeah, no, work zone cameras is a separate matter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are 2 other amendments to be offered by members of the body.
Okay.
The senator from District 40, I think, has an amendment to offer.
All right, let's recognize the Senator from District 40 has an amendment. Page will collect and distribute the Senator's
Thank you,
amendment.
Mr. President. And while we wait for the amendments to be circulated, Mr. President, I do want to thank the sponsor of the bill for working with us to make this bill much better. We heard them loud and clear that the intention of the bill was to provide for the safety of motorists along these 2 very important thoroughfares. I think the improvements that's been made by the bill go to speak to that. Oftentimes individuals, when they they get used to where these cameras are located, they adjust their speed based off of where they're located. Having the ability to rotate when they're working takes a lot of the predictability out and provide a safe roadway. The amendment that I have, is it okay to start explaining this?
Yep, Senator may explain the amendment.
All right, so before you colleagues, you have amendment 213327. We talked about this earlier when I was asking questions when the sponsor first introduced this bill. We want to make sure that this is just not a revenue generator for some third-party private company that's making money off of the state and stuff like that. And so this amendment before you just simply says at least 51% of the proceeds that arrive from this go back to the transportation trust fund. And obviously, we could use all the revenue we can for the transportation trust fund or whatever. And so that's simply what this amendment says. So I move the amendment, and hopefully it'll be accepted as a friendly amendment.
Yes, indeed, Mr. President. I want to thank the gentleman for meeting with me. For the benefit of the pages, one of the great things about doing what we're doing on the floor with second readers and amendments is we find out if there are concerns, so we can go back and work the concerns out and come up with acceptable amendments that are consensus amendments. This is one. We accept it as a friendly amendment.
All right, excellent. Let's see. We have Senator from District 4 on the amendment.
On the amendment, Mr. President.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that we're clear, because I understand the intent behind the amendment. Is the 51% that would be distributed then, is that after any amount is paid out? Because by contract, there's a certain amount, I believe it's 40 to 50% that goes out to the vendor. Would it be after that's already paid, then it's 51%, or is it 51% and then of
So-
those collected?
So the department, in order to, Mr. President, the department in the process of identifying a vendor will have this law in place, and so they could accommodate whatever RFPs or scope of work to meet these requirements, to make sure that the Transportation Trust Fund is benefiting more so than the independent contract.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, and I appreciate the response, and I appreciate the amendment. I'm just curious, because I know that this is some of the difficulty when we're dealing with private enterprise who sets these up, tears them down, and they get paid, in a lot of circumstances, they get paid regardless if the actual citation is collected or not. They get paid by the number. So I'm just worried that how this is written, it says that that operated by a state highway administration contractor, at least 51% shall be distributed to the TTF. Is it 51% of revenues collected, or is it 51? I'm not trying to complicate or delay the bill. I just want to make sure that your intent is being met with the best.
At least 51% of the fines.
Of the fines.
Right, of the fines.
Okay. I don't know that this captures that, because my concern is that we're going to, is it going to be the fines so you want 51% of the fine of each citation, and then the vendor gets.
The rest would can go to the vendor. It could go to repair the road. It could go to a whole number of different things.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the answer.
All right, let's go to the bill sponsor has a question.
No, I don't. I just want to recommend that the body
Senator
adopt
from
the
District
amendment.
11.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have a question for the maker of the amendment.
Question for the maker of the amendment.
Can you please remind me, because I know we had this conversation 3 years ago when we did this in the city, and if I remember correctly, the fines, where do the fines go in that case?
So the fines in that case, they go to the vendor, but in the city's bill, it goes back to making improvements to the road itself. Because as you know, Baltimore City is responsible for 83. In the case of the portions in Baltimore County of 83 and 695, the state is responsible for those. And so in this case,
parallel.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
All right. On the amendment, yes, checking with the chair of the committee.
Sorry, thank you very much. I don't want to jam this up either. I'm glad that they've all worked this out, but just the way that it's drafted, the senator from Frederick actually kind of squinted toward this. There is a portion of the bill that allocates the money already, and the amendment doesn't touch that portion of the bill. And so we probably need to just special order, or we can come back to this. But the intent of the amendment is good, based on what you all have worked out. But I don't think the amendment fully captures what the intent is.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? If the maker of the amendment is amenable, if we withdraw this amendment, there are some other amendments that we can take on, get it redrawn. We'll see if we can then maybe special order to the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think the bill was going to be special ordered anyway, as the sponsor was trying to work out some other amendments. So I withdraw this amendment, and we'll visit it at another time. I think there's another amendment coming up anyway.
Okay. The sponsor of the bill amendment is withdrawn. The sponsor of the bill has another amendment, or we?
I do. I've got one more amendment here, and this is from the gentleman from District. Where is it?
Oh, sorry. Is this senator from 45th District has?
Yes, exactly.
Senator from 45th has an amendment.
Yes, I do.
Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
I do.
All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Mr. President, thank you. I also want to send the same level of accolades that my colleague from the senator from the 40th, just being able to work with the senator from the 42nd on this important bill. But this just simply asks for a report. It sets the criteria which should be communicated within the report.
I want to thank the senator for his amendment, and the committee accepts it as a favorable amendment.
All right, so amendment's been moved, and no concerns. One moment. One moment. Senator, just to make sure that the
Yep.
amendment.
The amendments we're talking about is Senate Bill 338-813-322/1.
Okay, that is not the one we just handed out. Give us just one moment. Although the one that we have on the board was described as, it does look like a report.
I think I had the date wrong on the first one. This is the right one now.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let's just 322. Okay, we need this one. Let's get this one distributed.
March 12, 2025.
Okay.
That's the right one.
Dates, got it. All right, so just to confirm, Senator, this is 2030 is the appropriate. All right, perfect. And so we've moved 813-322. The sponsor of the bill.
Yes,
Same.
I'm looking at 813-322/1, and the committee accepts that as a favorable amendment.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Any objections? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments? I believe we are special ordering. Does the sponsor of the bill have a motion on the special order?
How long are we going to be meeting now? Another 10 minutes, maybe?
Hard to know, hard to know.
Why don't we special order it to the end of this session, and if we're not done by then, we'll have to special order it till tomorrow.
That works, that works. We still have plenty of time, so we're good. All right, any objections? Without objection, the bill will be special ordered to the appropriate time at the end of today's session, tentatively. All right, let's go to special order calendar number 33. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 544, Senator Bailey, Food Establishments Portable Chemical Toilets. Question is on the adoption of the two amendments offered from the floor by Senator Ellis.
All right, let's see, where are we? We have a floor amendment offered by the senator from the 28th District that we had a question about. Let's check with the senator, the maker of the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, for this time. And so I saw there is a replacement amendment floating around, but the potential sponsor of the amendment haven't shared that with me. So I'm still waiting for him or her to share that amendment with me to give me that courtesy to make a motion.
Well, this amendment is still before the body.
This amendment.
The current amendment that was introduced last evening.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I really don't appreciate the discourtesy of not sharing the amendment with me. So let me read this. Put my glasses on to read this.
Well, let's do this. I mean, we still have the current amendment before us.
Yeah, President Reagan said years ago, you have to trust but verify. So I really believe in. So let me see this amendment here. Yes. Okay. So, Mr. President, I move to withdraw my amendment.
All right. The prior amendment is withdrawn. Let's see if let's get this amendment introduced. All right. Let's recognize the senator from District 7 has
Yes,
the
Mr.
amendment.
President.
I have an amendment.
Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right. Senator may explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the amendment we discussed last night that basically deals with wells. Takes out the water source and just makes sure that these can't be placed by a well. First of all, Senator from District 28, I apologize. You know, I was talking to both the floor leader and the chair of the committee because they're the ones who are working the bill. They looked at the amendment. I apologize. I was not trying to disrespect you at all. You know, we had the discussion on the floor last night. I said what the amendment was going to do. That's what I brought to the floor. To the body as a whole, I want to commend the senator from District 28 as he brought up here the other night or the other day when we discussed this, his concerns about drinking water, potable water in these toilets should one of them leak, which they usually don't because they are self-contained, and that's why the concern with wells. So should these be close to a well, they don't leach in the water. So I thank the body for giving me the chance to offer this amendment and ask for its favorable consideration.
All right, Senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the interest and the support on this from my good friend from the committee, the senator from Charles County. I thank the gentleman for the amendment. It is considered a friendly amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion of the amendment? If not, the amendment is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 544 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. I'm missing, here it is. This is from the Executive Nominations Committee. Clerk will read the report, excuse me.
Report number 5, the Senate Executive Nominations Committee reports favorably on the attached appointments and recommends that the Senate of Maryland advise and consent to these appointments. Clarence K. Lamb, Chair.
All right, recognizing the Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Calendar number 5 is a calendar that includes some of the gubernatorial secretaries as well as appointees for, no gubernatorial secretaries, appointees for various boards and commissions. This is the list of nominees that we heard this past Monday evening. The names of the nominees can be found in your floor system under the Other Business tab. I request that we consider these nominees in regular session under Rule 22A and move that we special order this report until the appropriate time tomorrow.
All right, the senator has moved that we special order the report and hear it in open session tomorrow. Yes,
Mr. President.
Recognizing the minority whip.
If we want to have the opportunity to separate someone, we would just do that tomorrow, correct?
It's probably for the best, just if we could give it to the chair ahead of time and we'll do it.
I will do that.
And most importantly, if we could just get it to the secretary's office so we can load it up in the board ahead of time separately.
Thank you very much.
Great. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Any objections? Without objection, the report will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow and heard in open session. Actually, can we, Madam Secretary, if we could ring the bells, please? And if we could do a quorum call.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Trying to stall a little bit, but it's all right. Okay, let's go to third readers, calendar 37. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 46, Senator Watson, Real Property, Wrongful Detainer Actions.
All right, Senate Bill 46 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 46, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 63, Senator Muse, Cooperative Housing Corporations, Condominiums and Homeowners Association, Funding of Reserve Accounts and Preparation of Funding Plans.
Senate Bill 63 is on third reading for final passage. Recognizing the majority leader.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to special order this bill until tomorrow.
All right, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 107, Senator Sidnor, Evidence, Interception of Oral Communication, Fair Housing Testing.
All right, Senate Bill 107 is on third reading for final passage, recognizing the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just in speaking on this bill, we had an extensive debate on amendments yesterday. I just think it's important, again, to flag for the body. This is something that should not be done lightly, and I know we've discussed this bill in the past, but Maryland has a very long, proud, and I think appropriate tradition of protecting people from being unknowingly and without a warrant wiretapped. You know, probably the first time any Marylanders became broadly aware of this law that aren't attorneys or law enforcement was the famous situation with Linda Tripp and Monica Lewinsky, where Linda Tripp recorded a phone call with Monica Lewinsky about her involvement with the former president, Bill Clinton, and that was actually a crime. And she took advantage of a friendship and recorded that, no matter what you think about the overall action. So a lot of people probably didn't realize that until that happened, but it's a crime in Maryland. It's a crime to do it. It is a crime for a parent who suspects their child might be getting assaulted or molested to secretly record something. It's a crime for a woman to record, to warrantlessly wiretap someone and then to try to get them in trouble with domestic violence. So, and try to use that. It's not allowed to wiretap somebody. This bill, when we did body cameras for police, which I was on the task force on the implementation of that, we took hours and hours in the Judicial Proceedings Committee getting that language just right so we could understand how you'd have notification, so there'd be an understanding of making sure that people knew they were being filmed, so that we could have transparency for our law enforcement. And then we did a task force for almost 2 years on implementing it properly. And now we're going to just blow it up to do it for people in fair housing? I ask anybody here who's ever donated to the ACLU or been a part of organizations like that defend civil liberties. Many of times I disagree with, but I mean this is really not good policy. If we're going to ever violate the two-party consent law, we should do it for something like some of the amendments that were mentioned last night and voted on last night. And I would argue you really don't want to pierce that veil ever, even for things that are really well-intentioned. So, Mr. President, I would urge the body, this is not Republican or Democrat issue. You know, there's lots of great aims we could accomplish if we allowed for wiretapping without someone's knowledge, but there's also lots of nefarious bad things that could happen. And so once you start to water this down, you don't know where it ends. So again, this is the senator, hopefully from Carroll County and Frederick County speaking, not the minority whip. I would urge the body to resist this bill and vote no, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, third reading, final passage. Any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 28 votes to the affirmative, Senate Bill 107, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 181, Senator Hedelman, Correctional Services, Geriatric, and Medical Parole.
Senate Bill 181 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 36 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 181, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 648, Senator Muse, Correctional Services, Medical Parole, Life Imprisonment.
All right, Senate Bill 648 is on third reading for final passage. Recognizing the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to special order this at the appropriate time tomorrow.
All right, any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 844, Senator Hershey, Maryland Self-Service Storage Act, Sale of Personal Property and Satisfaction of Lien, Notice Requirement.
Senate Bill 844 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 844, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 929, Senator Brooks, Work Group on Mail-in Ballot Accessibility.
Senate Bill 929 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 35 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 929, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 956, Senator West, Health Insurance, Medicare Supplement Policies, Insurance Producer Commission.
Senate Bill 956 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 956, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Have we, did we get the revised? I didn't see anybody walk in. Okay. We'll just leave it as unfinished business. So in that case, the desk is as clear as it's going to get. And we are in a pretty good place. Not too bad, not too bad. I thought it was going to be a little bit longer today, so we're in a good spot. Yes, Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I went down to the amendment office on the bill we were talking, I can't remember the number, the Beltway speed camera bill.
Yes.
There is some work that needs to be done, so I'm going to take the other senator with me down as soon as we adjourn, but we'll need a special order of the bill till tomorrow.
We could just leave it as unfinished business, and we'll just have it right at the beginning tomorrow.
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's go ahead and see, check with the Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll vote on about 20 bills at 3 o'clock today.
Okay, Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have bill hearings. We will start at 3 p.m. followed by a voting session. Thank you, Mr.
3 p.m. tomorrow. Budget and tax?
Well, we don't have anything at the moment, but hang out, stay nearby.
Stay frosty. All right, judicial proceedings?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will vote today at 3 p.m.
3 p.m. it is, judicial proceedings. Okay, any other standing committees, select committees, joint committees, delegations, other duties as assigned committees? Senator from the 27th, looks like there's a, waiting to say, God bless you. Yes, Senator from Prince George's.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, yesterday we were on the floor for quite some time, and during that process of us being on the floor voting, there was a very, very significant basketball game going on, and yes, sir. So Largo Lions, my alma mater high school, proud of District 25, they were playing the good senator from District 45's Dunbar Poets, and Largo took the W, 70-64 in overtime. And so it was a pretty good game, and Frederick County had a good basketball game, and on Friday, we'll have the 2A championship, so hopefully we can get out of here because the game starts at 6, and then we'll be playing.
I wish.
We will be playing Newtown High School, which is in the Good Senators District, #1 ranked. And so looking forward to some more competition. It's amazing to watch a lot of our youth do some amazing things, and for us to have a little fun and just pushing these guys on to be the greatest that they can possibly be. So shout out to all of our high school students that are doing amazing things, and to all of the 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A teams in the championships this week.
Excellent, excellent. Very good, very good. Congratulations to Largo. We think a good senator from the 45th should have some Largo colors on his tie tomorrow. Is what I just, you know. No, in all seriousness. We're going to have a presentation before we leave from the senator from the capital city. Before we do that, we want to check with the senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to let everyone know, next Friday, if you would like to come to the prayer breakfast, it will be in the Miller Building. We're going to have the chaplain of the Baltimore Ravens speaking, and also have the Naval Ensemble singing as well. So if you'd like to come, again, it is a free event and breakfast. Please contact my office, and we'll be able to take care of you, and we'd love to see everybody come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator. All right. Anything else? Yes, announcements. Yes, Senator from Montgomery County.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I have the honor of having been asked by my friends in the Jewish caucus to mention that tonight is the beginning of the Jewish holiday of Purim, and to quickly give a background as to why this is such an important holiday. So I'll ask you to indulge me for a moment while we step back from the grind of these waning days here before crossover and step into the Wayback Machine, where we are landing 5 centuries before the Common Era to a time when the great then nation of Persia was growing and dominating much of the world, particularly throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East. And Persia was ruled by a king in the Old Testament referred to as King Ahasuerus. I think many of you know him as Xerxes the First. And this was a time where the rule of Persia had swallowed the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, and now they were under the rule of the Persians. And the king, Ahasuerus, named a prime minister. The prime minister came from a sect of idol worshipers, which was still a big thing in the day. He also wore, to show the support of this sect, an idol attached to his clothing. He was a virulent Jew hater because the Jews were not idol worshipers. They believed in the one true God. Now, when he became prime minister, Haman, that was his name, there you go, and yes, and so in Jewish culture, growing up as a child, whenever the story is told and the name Haman is mentioned, you boo. He's the bad guy in the story. So Haman demanded that when he was seen in public, that everyone bow down before him. Now, we have the heroes of the story, Mordecai and his cousin Esther. Mordecai was a Jew, Esther a Jew, and Mordecai was her older cousin who raised her. Now, King Ahasuerus, being the sexist pig that he was, demanded at a gathering that his then current wife, Queen Vashti, perform before his guests wearing nothing other than her crown. To her credit, Queen Vashti refused. For that, she was executed. Now, King Ahasuerus wanted a new queen. So he demanded that every woman throughout the kingdom be brought before him for him to determine his next queen. Well, Mordecai complied and brought Esther, his cousin, to the capital. The king determined that she was beautiful and was to be his next queen. So he took Esther as his queen, not knowing that Esther was a Jew. Meanwhile, Mordecai was outside the gates of the king's palace. Mordecai overheard a conversation amongst a couple of the king's closest allies discussing how they were going to assassinate him. Mordecai shared that with Esther, who was now to become queen. She shared that with the king, and the two alleged plotters were executed. And the king was very grateful for that. Well, now we have Haman in public, demanding people bow down before him, and he went past Mordecai, who had just shared with Esther about this assassination plot. And Mordecai, seeing this idol on Haman's clothing, refused to bow before him. Haman was incensed and went to the king and stated that obviously these Jews are rabble-rousers and they are a problem, and asked the king to order a proclamation for every Jew under the control of Persia to be executed. The king agreed. Word got back to Mordecai. Mordecai, in turn, went to Esther and said, Esther, this is happening. And in fact, Haman cast lots to determine the date that the Jews would be executed. Hence the name Purim in the festival. In Hebrew, it means to cast a lot. That's where the name originated. He cast a lot, the date was determined, and Esther, who was not permitted to approach the king unless told to do so, boldly went to the king. And there's a little bit of a story about how it all happened. I'll skip all that, but just simply say, Esther let the king know that she was going to be executed. And the king was infuriated and said, what? Nobody is going to touch you. And she said, I am a Jew, and you've placed an order, an edict for all Jews to die. And he was infuriated, and he goes, what is that about? He had not paid attention as he should have, and it was revealed that Haman had brought this to him, and the king was incensed. He had built a gallows for Mordecai, who would not bow to Haman, out in the courtyard. The king ordered that Haman be hung from those gallows, not Mordecai, because he loved his wife, Queen Esther, and he named Mordecai, who had tipped off the plotted assassination attempt, and named him to be the new prime minister. But the twist to the story is that once that order had been given, it could not be rescinded, the order to kill the Jews. So what the king did was extended an order that the Jews were permitted to arm themselves and defend themselves against the onslaught. Well, it was Haman's sect of idol worshippers, including his 10 sons, who set upon the Jews in Persia to kill them, but the Jews were now armed and defeated and killed the entirety of the sect, including all of Haman's sons who were killed in the battle. And this, my friends, is a story of hope and redemption. And we, not just as Jews, but as everyone, can look at this story and say, wherever there are oppressed people, there is hope. And that is why this story has been celebrated for centuries. And I can assure you there is no people on this planet that craves for peace more than Jews, having suffered through very similar incidents like this for centuries. And I hope and pray that in my time, we will see peace in the Middle East, where everyone can enjoy their freedom to be who they are and pray as they choose. And colleagues, tomorrow you are all welcome to come to the Cade Room starting at 9 a.m. to share in that tasty treat served on Purim called a Chumentashen, named for Haman. It's a 3-sided pastry, and that is done in the shape of the 3-sided hat that Haman would wear when he was in public. So, colleagues, celebrate Purim. Let's always fight oppression, and God bless. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. And we will transition to the senator from the capital city.
Thank you, Mr. President. My task is to uplift Women's History Month, but I feel like we just got a lesson in women's history hearing about the courageousness of Queen Esther. So thank you for that very eloquent recitation. But I am here to lift up women's history, so if I may add a second woman to our dialogue
Please.
for today. Today I rise in honor a trailblazer of Maryland's women's history, Juanita Jackson Mitchell. In 1950, Juanita Jackson Mitchell became the first black woman admitted to the Maryland bar to practice law, a monumental achievement in a time when black women faced significant racial and gender barriers in the legal profession. Her courage and resilience in breaking both racial and gender barriers paved the way for future generations of women, especially women of color, to enter law and public service. Mitchell was not just a pioneer in the legal field, she was also a powerful advocate for justice, equality, and civil rights. As an attorney for the NAACP, she fought tirelessly for voting rights, education access, and housing equality opportunities. She understood the intersection of race and gender, and her work directly improved the lives of women in Maryland, empowering them to demand their rightful place in society. Her influence extended far beyond the courtroom. Mitchell helped organize voter registration drives and led legal challenges to discriminatory practices, ensuring that black women could fully participate in the democratic process. As we celebrate Women's History Month, let us remember Juanita Jackson Mitchell, not only for her courage as a legal trailblazer, but also for her unwavering commitment to women's rights and her lasting legacy on future generations of women leaders. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you for that. Recognized Senator from District 11.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move that we journalize both the good senator from the capital city and the senator from District 19. If we can do that today,
All right.
please.
Without objection, we will do so. Thank you very much. Nope. Okay. All right. I think that does it. I think we are through for today. Whoop. Nope. Just yes. Recognizing the minority leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just one more announcement in celebrating Maryland Pride. There's a bill hearing in EEE today that is going to hopefully designate the original Maryland Orange Crush as the state cocktail. And as a result, there may or may not be a speakeasy somewhere in the Senate building where you could possibly taste one of these delicious orange crushes. If you happen to find where that room is, the secret code is SB 562. So keep that in mind as you are searching around and maybe finding a delicious orange crush today.
Non-alcoholic orange crush, I assume.
That's what I
Yes,
heard.
of course. Right. Excellent. All right. All right. Very good. All right. Let's see. Let's do a quorum call.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Friday, March 13th at 11 a.m.
11 a.m. without objection, so ordered. See you all then.